Hey, everybody, welcome back. This is Words with Dani, and according to Dani, it's also Words with Emily. So I guess it's Words with Dani and Emily, and I forget what episode we're on, but this is becoming a more regular. I think it's 13. Becoming more regular. We're trying to do we've been doing one every other week or so, and we're going to continue with just not pre-showing, and pre-showing is part of the show. And we are still sort of putting together and organizing how we would like to have a live chat group based around some of this stuff. And details on that will be more and coming soon. So I just wanted to give you guys the update on that. So Dani, welcome back. Nice to see you, hon. What's going on?
Nice to see you. I know we're both kind of low on humanity right now.
Yeah, I just, I recorded a show with Robert last night too, and I was talking a little bit about this, but it's kind of, I'm in an unusual position for me because I'm feeling sort of right now, like I'm just feeling a little low energy and a little bummed, which is really an unusual space for me. But it's just kind of like, I mentioned briefly on Robert's show last night, my car got broken into, and it wasn't even that my car got broken into, it's that every other car in the parking lot got broken into, and just like our group of people, like our friends that are tight-knit, sort of awake and aware crowd, we're pretty evolved, you know what I mean? And so sometimes you have that moment where like, and that's something that I nor any people we know would do something like that. And you have that moment of like, we still live in a world where people just run through a parking lot and bash everybody's window in and take whatever they want. And so that was like, I don't care about the stuff. Like that's not, so that's been just weird. And I don't know, like,
and also the violation, like I know whenever I'm stolen from, like it's a very specific type of rage of like, it's not about the stuff, it's about the social contract. Like, that someone would go that far outside the social contract really shakes me on a very deep level. Is that part of it as well?
Yeah, we're not perfect. I mean, I did some naughty stuff when I was a kid and when I was into drugs and stuff like that. Those things are far behind me, and I never did anything like that. You know what I mean? But it's remindful of like, okay, your own imperfections and other people have them too, but we live in this time where people's imperfections have become like extreme and effective of everybody else. So it's just been like a couple of days of just sort of like reflecting. And then, I mean, obviously all of the social nonsense continues. We can even touch in a little bit about this Iowa caucus bullshit and whatever, but it's just like, I keep harping a little bit on these Project Veritas videos, right? And it's not because I think they're super important or I like James O'Keefe. I actually think this is just another of a million signs that of crazy things going on, and that I don't think he's an honest actor. But for some reason, this just ignoring of things, like bothers me. That like even people within the alternative media. So right before we got started today, I was looking for articles to see if there was any articles on why the mainstream media is ignoring the Project Veritas videos, right? Like see if anybody had written an article about that. And most of there were articles, but it wasn't considering this group of videos. It was ones from 2016, back at the election when he, damaged Hillary with some of the videos, and some from 2017 and when with the CNN stuff or whatever. There was only one or two articles about this one. And I read this article. I just started reading. I didn't read the whole thing. It was fairly lengthy. But the gist of it is that this person obviously is not a fan of James O'Keefe or Project Veritas, which on some levels, neither am I. Like I actually do appreciate that style of journalism, and I think there should be more of it coming from every angle on a certain level. But, I don't really particularly care for James O'Keefe as a person, and I don't like the partisanship of how partisan the organization is, and I've said that. But this person's argument was that, of course it's going to fall flat. This type of thing isn't like, so the Breitbarts and the Daily Wire and those kinds of people have covered this, right? But the left, trying to get the attention of the left, like James O'Keefe should have known this would never have landed, because this isn't what the left cares about. What the left cares about is dumb shit like Elizabeth Warren saying Bernie Sanders called her, is like Elizabeth Warren accusing Bernie Sanders of being sexist. that like these things, that these are not things like we're concerned about gulags and communism and things like that aren't actually things that people care about. What they care about more is wokeness bullshit.
So I want to jump in because this has rocked me as well, and it's like, it's so weird that this particular, not the one that you sent me on Elizabeth Warren,
right?
Because it was like, okay, that's an outlier, but this one has really rocked me at the same time, and I've been in deep contemplation of like, why is this not landing and why is no one getting it? And I don't know that it's they don't care. I think it's that they don't have the capacity to deal with it. I think it's easier to deal with pronouns and sexism than to deal with a larger, disgusting communist agenda.
But I think that's the same thing. I think we're in this place where people are, okay, so maybe saying they don't care isn't it, but they don't care about things that are complex. People are only interested in things that they can, like, nanny name call, like a saying right back to you, and that's it.
Well, I feel like, I mean, we've touched in on this, and it's like I've spun out the past couple weeks because I looked at the last show that we did, and like I was super ragey and I was super otherizing, and I didn't really have a lot of tolerance for these people who don't know what we know, right? So I'm taking ownership of that, and I'm looking at that, and I'm also looking at like, why is this so upsetting to me? You know, like, why am I losing it in this conversation? And I feel like, to me, and I want to be wrong, but I feel like everyone ignoring these Project Veritas videos, and I want to be clear, it's not that there are these outlier staffers who have these radical ideas. What I most take issue with is the fact that it's been buried in the mainstream and that the Sanders campaign hasn't made a comment. That's what scares me the most, is that they haven't said, these aren't our beliefs, we're not on board with this, we're letting these people go. And so I feel like it represents an unhealable divide. Like, I feel like this is a moment where it's like, I don't know how we're going to heal this or how we're going to cross this. Because you saw, like, I had posted twice. First was like, hey, I'm just curious, what do my Bernie supporter friends think about these videos? And it was this disgusting, which we talked about, like, the Bernie supporters who were like disgusted by it, none of them had watched it, but were speaking with this like arrogant, ignorant authority around it. But then the second post was after Tim Pool posted his thing where there were 4 videos, and like, why have we still not heard from Bernie? And
isn't it funny that after all the criticism, you and I find ourselves in a group with only one other person who cares about the Project Veritas videos, and that's Tim Pool.
I know, it's so.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Tim, and thank you for graciously accepting my appreciation along with my criticism.
But I feel like it's gone to the crazy place, because it's like la 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 la, and no one was willing to look at them, and like all of the people are saying it's propaganda, it's bullshit, it's live unedited footage. Yeah. Like, you can't argue with it. And I feel like we've crossed a divide where insanity is ruling, and it feels like, because at the same time, I'm going to try to make this as clear as possible. The same day that I'd posted the thing about the Veritas videos, I'd posted a like kind of dumb meme that was just like, I know amazing people who voted for Trump. I know amazing people who voted for Hillary. Let's not assassinate our friends' characters because of their voting choices. And I was ripped to shreds as a Nazi by someone who I've known for 20 years, went to her wedding, have had Thanksgiving at her house a million times, and now she continues to harass me with private messages telling me that I'm a Nazi. And what I feel like is that I know. And it's like, I go to like, I wanted to send you all of the crazy shit she was sending me, like some article that said Anne Frank's sister said that Trump is a Nazi. And I'm like, what the fuck are you sending? You know, like, and I want to be disgusted, but then there's a part that's like, this is my friend. Like, I don't want to dehumanize her. And I realized, like, she really believes it. Like, she authentically believes that the dude in the Oval is a Nazi, and that that there are tons of people in government who are actual, literal Nazis. And she believes from the bottom of her heart that the situation at the border is a concentration camp. So what do we do when people are being fed so many lies? And so now we're sharing the same information.
Okay, and this is where, and this goes to something I talked about before, I think with Robert, with the whole space as a white construct thing, right? Like, yeah. There was this video of this kid who does like debate, competitive debate club in college. And he got kicked out of his school, first the debate team from the school, and then eventually the school. But it's a very controversial debate teacher they have there, right? But this kid kind of has a different position than most of the other kids on the team or in the class or even in the whole area of the debate. And the teacher was trying to argue essentially that space doesn't exist because Black people can't go there, right? That space is a white construct, and that it's used to control, right? Okay, like it's.
Wait, space doesn't exist, like this.
Not space doesn't.
Outer
well,
space?
I'm of the same opinion that space doesn't exist, but not because of it's a white construct and because Black people can't either. I see space. I see space as not being what people think it is, and I don't think there is an outer space in the way it's been described to us. That's a different topic. But this guy was literally saying is that space doesn't exist, and the reason that he can argue that is because the idea of space is something that is a white construct, and that Black people, your average Black person, can't actually go there, therefore it doesn't exist.
Are there laws that prohibit Black people from going to space?
No, well, they can't afford to go. So I'm not saying
buy a private spaceship. I don't even understand.
Right. My point is this. So my point, why I'm bringing this up was, so this kid is sitting there flabbergasted and making all the same statements and things that you're saying right now, right? The idea, I think, a great topic for a debate would be whether space exists or not. So he's getting the topic right, but he's getting the context of it completely wrong, right? Like, to me, the question is, what are we living in? Where are we? Is there space the way it's been described? And he's just saying, because it's an idea that was come up with by white people, whether it exists or not doesn't matter. It doesn't exist because it's not approachable for the average Black person. Okay? And so it was just like, whoa. But like, this is the it's in these kinds of things that there's a truth revealed, right? Like that we should be having a debate about the existence of space, and then it's completely turned into something cartoonish, right? So my point with this, why I'm saying this is, your friend is right. There are literal Nazis in our government, but they're not on this front woke political front thing. They're deep into the scientific agencies like NASA and intelligence agencies and whatnot. And there are people who come from now our second generation of the things that were holdovers from like Project Paperclip and stuff like that.
Right.
So she's right, there are Nazis in our government, but she's wrong about them having anything to do with the office of the president per se or anything like that.
Right. Her allegation was that the dude in the Oval is a Nazi, and because I am advocating that we don't hate people who vote for him, I am a Nazi by association.
Okay, so would she be on board then with the changing of the definition of what a Nazi is to a Nazi as somebody who absolutely loves Israel more than their own country?
We're not having sane conversations.
Yeah, okay.
Like this is where I'm very disheartened and bummed out about humanity, because this is a close friend for 20 years who knows the content of my character and the quality of my heart, and is accusing me of being a Nazi because I'm not denouncing the people who voted for the dude in the Oval. And I just feel like if this is where we've devolved, like interpersonally in my own social sphere, I'm having a very hard time holding out hope for the masses, for us to get it together.
Yeah, it does feel like that. This, so we mulled over a couple of topics to talk about today, but we kind of settled on, talking about this whole thing of being bummed right now and being a little bit sad about the state of humanity and about, this project that we're all involved in, which is trying to like reclaim sanity or whatever, it is a little bit, it bums me out. And, so to kind of, I've faced against that too. I had a family member recently, and, this is actually probably going to be the topic of our first sort of live group chat that we sort of do, sort of what to do when a friend or a family member calls you racist or Nazi or whatever, because this is something that both you and I have been dealing with, and it's gotten increasingly close to home when, couldn't be the farther thing from the truth about either of us. But this is how simple, like what's really sad is how small the thinking capacity of what we're seemingly intelligent, well-educated human beings, right? Like, some of these people who do this have PhDs and law degrees and all this kind of stuff, but there's no patience or even at this point seeming ability for nuanced and complex thought and discussion around a variety of ideas and the ways that they intersect with each other. Everything is just totally binary. You're either with us or against us. It's black or it's white. You're a racist or you're not. You're a homophobe or you're not. There's no like place in there for like a nuanced opinion with multiple varying levels, varying layers and tentacles to it.
No, and it's like, and again, it's because of the propaganda. Like, I will say that like the propaganda machine is very effective right now because it's like Trump derangement syndrome blows things so out of proportion. So getting him out of office becomes like apocalyptic, life or death. It's this noble cause that people have taken up. So because it's so extreme, like the little autistic girl and her climate hysteria, right?
Yeah.
Like, because it's turned up so loud, it is very hard to have those nuanced conversations. And the other piece is that the press is totally lying to us. And because the press has been lying to us for a long time, but it feels like it's only since like maybe like 6 or 8 years that it's gone like to this extent of lying and covering up stories or whatnot. And I think that the general populace is slow to pick up on it. So they're believing their news. And when you and I, who are, I would dare to say more well-versed, I'll just speak for myself. When I share my knowledge with people who think that the New York Times is telling them the truth or the Washington Post is telling them the truth, like I get zero credit. I get 0 ounces of attention. There's like, it's immediately brushed off as hysterical conspiracy theory cuckoo-ness because it's so counter to the dominant narrative, which is orange man bad, socialism amazing.
Yeah. So a couple of things to say there. Like one of the things that I do. So, okay, you said that like it's only been so bad in the last 6 or 8 years. And I'm starting to come to this recognition that that's not true. That it's always been this bad. We just have more ways of noticing it now. Right. Like, do you ever listen to, who Michael Malice is?
Yeah, I've been on Michael Malice.
Yeah, I love Michael Malice.
Binge.
Right. And so he was just on Dave Rubin this past week. And when he was talking, I agree with him when he was saying, no, government and politics and media, it's always been this bad. It's just, we didn't have all these different angles and lenses to look at it through. Right. So it seemed normal. Like there was no social media. Right. There was no YouTube.
What we didn't have were these personalities telling us what to think about the news or the lies or the whatnot, because I see the things that my allegedly liberal friends post that indicates that the impeachment is going well for them. And I'm watching it and I'm like, there's nothing here. There's sarcasm and there's like attitude, but because their talking heads aren't telling me how to interpret it, I don't share their interpretation.
Right. So my point is that 15 or so, at a certain point we had cable news and then there was a lot more commentary on what the politicians were doing. But in general, before that, we had like a few authoritative news sources, right? But there wasn't an internet and there wasn't social media. So people couldn't like dig up the actual truth and post it in the comments in real time. There wasn't an avenue where like average people or an alternative media could start to create noise by poking holes, and then further push these companies to have to, you know, further layer bullshit to keep that covered up. Like there was no, you know, what's their name? Some of those very respected newsmen like Cronkite, whatever, they didn't have to deal with the comment section. They didn't have to deal with people making videos analyzing the show they just did. They didn't have to deal with that.
But did they have laws preventing them from like speaking whistleblower names? P.S. Adam Schiff's daughter's boyfriend, or vaccinations?
That the whistleblower is Adam Schiff's daughter's boyfriend?
Oh yeah.
I didn't know. I know who the whistleblower is, and I know he's in intelligence, but I didn't know he was Adam Schiff's daughter's boyfriend.
Oh yeah, there are many photographs online showing them all together with Schiffy pants and the daughter.
Wait, yeah. So a couple of things, right? Like, then the other thing, besides Michael Malice talking about, I love Michael Malice, but the other thing is I'm reading this really good book right now called Cosmic Trigger by Robert Anton Wilson.
Okay.
Right? And it's interesting. So he wrote this book in the 70s, and he's like, you'd think he was talking about now, right? He's talking about literally by this point in 1977, he had realized that the left was just as mind controlled as the right. He had figured that out, and he was talking about, you know, that he figured it out in the 60s, you know, in comparison to what he thought in the 50s. By the 60s, he'd realized blah, 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 right? So it's a great, you should read this book. It's really good because, and I was talking about this in our Patreon group the other day, but he speaks from his various aspect selves. Like he has one part of himself he refers to as the metaprogrammer, the philosopher, the physicist. Like he has like all these different aspects of himself that he speaks from. You know what I mean? Which is pretty cool. But he was way out there ahead of the game. And this whole thing that we are talking about when we're talking about this big gigantic monster of truth and bullshit and illusion and whatever, he calls it Chapel Perilous. Right? Like this whole monstrous thing that we're looking at. And the way he describes all these little ins and outs of Chapel Perilous is quite good. But it's a good book. Actually, I bought it in Santa Fe. The last time I was in Santa Fe, there's like a little used bookstore. It's not part of any other building. It's just like a little hut of its own, like not too far outside of downtown. You know what I'm talking about?
It has like columns out front.
Yeah. It's just like there's hardly anything else on that street.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I bought it there like a few years ago, and I just started reading it last week. One thing
that I do think, well, it's new in my experience, was like when I posted the thing about, hey guys, what do you think about these Veritas videos? I was accused of trafficking in right-wing nonsense. So these partisan labels where I was like, I never claimed any allegiance to the right wing, and I'm not even criticizing Bernie. I'm just asking what you guys think about this. But take any point of view where you're not 1,000,000% on board and haven't drunk all the leftist Kool-Aid and you're a right winger. That feels very new to me. And that also, and the other piece is that it's a reputation destroyer. I mean, 99% of my friends who voted for the dude in the Oval are closeted about it.
Yeah, so just so you know, this does exist on the right too, but mostly in like the QAnon crowd. Like anybody who doesn't trust the plan is a person non grata. It's just that isn't spoken about so publicly as all this other stuff is. So that same dynamic does exist on the right. It's a little bit different.
Do you believe the Q stuff?
No, I remember I was the first one to coin it QAnonsense. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just
like it's all bullshit.
No, just there can be no disinformation that doesn't have kernels of truth, right? But this weaving people along for like literally for more than 2 years now, we've been hearing big things are going to happen next week, right? And that they're going to arrest all the pedophiles next week and all this kind of stuff. So even if ultimately a lot of the things that they're saying have some grain of truth, and in the end there does appear to be some truth, the way they've strung people along like this and had them take a lot of time away from focusing on their own life to follow the plan and read all these ridiculous things online and whatnot. There's many different ways to use the art of both disinformation, misinformation, and non-information. And I would call the QAnon thing a combination of those three. But one of the ways that you can use it is just to get people to waste tremendous amounts of time trying to read between two lines that don't even actually exist. Right?
Do you know that Julia Roberts is a Q believer?
That's hilarious.
There's a picture of her on her Instagram with like this eye on her hand, and it's like, we see you, we're coming after you, like you're going down. All the Q people have been posting it this week.
That's fucking funny. But yeah, so that does exist on the right. It's a little, they're not nearly as abusive and gross with it in some ways, just because those people are also largely conspiracy theorists, and they, you know what I mean? Like they've been marginalized and whatever, and they don't have a lot of tolerance for the left, so they don't really care what they say about that, kind of thing. But, here's the other thing. But yes, that is a feature that is getting grosser and grosser, but it's been going on for a while. You know what I mean? But I think, on the last go round, you wrote in Bernie. So even though you didn't see him as perfect, like there was something there that was at least speaking to you on some level back 4 years ago. Totally. Right. So now it's not. And so you're seeing things differently. And so for a lot of us, we already had nothing resonating about Bernie then. So what you're saying, we went through this 4, 8, or 12 years ago when we started speaking up against Barack Obama, or when we started, even like those of us who were, willing to be honest on both sides were pointing out the problem. It seemed that sort of the answer to Barack Obama was a Ron Paul, but he's not perfect either. So some of us who got used to sort of, that there isn't going to be a politician that's going to come along and be the good guy and save us, have been having these kinds of names called at us for a really long time, from one side or the other.
Yeah. The one thing that confuses me just as like human psychology, and I'm realizing this is what it really comes down to, is like we're dealing with the issue of, I see coming up against human psychology, but like, yeah, I wrote in Bernie and then I changed my mind. And it feels like right now there's this like inability to take in additional information and pivot and grow and shift. It's like very fixed. It's like, either Bernie wins or it's a Nazi genocide.
Right. Well, I think there's some of that, right? Like, it's such an interesting dynamic to watch, because these people who are really into Bernie, like, I don't, they're ignoring even the most important thing, which is like Bernie doesn't even believe in his own bullshit because he didn't stand up for it against the people who attacked him for it last time.
That's the thing, like he's not a leader. Like, and I'm not trying to rip Bernie, but like he showed us that he doesn't stand up for himself and he doesn't stand up for justice.
And he doesn't stand up for his supporters or the people who work for him or anything like that.
Exactly.
Right?
So why would we give this man like the free world?
But people they can't, they're just entrenched. It's right. But I did know
entrenched because I don't think it's because they think Bernie, well, I think it's both. They don't understand the socialism thing. They don't know anything about Agenda 21. And they think that the dude in the Oval is the incarnation of evil. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that. So people are clenching in that way. But there is a certain kind of clenching in that I'm starting to appreciate. I saw this poll a few days ago about like, okay, so they voted like how of the people, like people who are going to vote for Bernie, if they were asking them, if Bernie doesn't win, will you vote for the eventual Democratic nominee, right? And like, a lot of the people, like the people who support Warren or Biden, or some of them said yes, and some of the Bernie's was like 16%. But the Andrew Yang people, they're like, nah, dude, it's Andrew Yang or bust. We're not going to, move from supporting Andrew Yang to supporting Joe Biden. That makes no sense. Whatever we think of Andrew Yang and why he's there and what he's doing, I like that. I like that thing that it's like, no, I'm not just going to do whatever I'm told to do. Like I like this person. I like their ideas. If it's not these ideas, you're not going to talk me into voting for something that is the exact opposite of these ideas just because they wear the same letter on their jacket. You know what I mean? So I thought that was kind of good and interesting and whatnot.
Yeah, I respect that.
But
I respect anyone who thinks for themselves and doesn't just swallow the Dem or the Republican Kool-Aid. Like, it's like, please be nuanced, please. And this is what I realize we're really up against is sheepthink. And given that humans are wired to go along with the herd, I don't see a way out of it right now. Yeah. I would love to, and I'm open to it. And I've been in a bit of a funk of like, oh my God, people,
Yeah. So one more thing I wanted to say about the Veritas thing, and then we can move on to some of this socialism, this appeal of socialism because of not being aware of Agenda 21 or 2030 or whatever is, and I talked about this briefly with Robert last night, but you know, he's of the opinion that, so in regards to the Veritas video, he's of the opinion that, you know, the establishment doesn't really like Bernie, right? And that they're against Bernie. And I'm saying that's not true. I'm saying that if the established media was against Bernie, they'd cover the Veritas videos.
There's something weird there. There's right. Because even Rogan, and he did make a statement about the commercial that Bernie put out, but you mentioned Jimmy Dore. The fact that none of those guys are talking about it, I think there's something way fishier.
Well, this is what I'm thinking. This is how I'm seeing this, is that, okay, both the original stunt with Elizabeth Warren calling Bernie, because remember what happened. On a Friday, James O'Keefe said he had some things that were going to come out on Monday that would bring the Bernie Sanders campaign down, right? So that was on Friday. He should not have done that. He should have just fucking released them, because they were able to figure out over the weekend what it was and concoct this bullshit scandal with Elizabeth Warren. That is a created thing. That argument between Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren was created to come out that Monday and cover up the Veritas videos, because they know very well that the left is more concerned with sexism than with what we saw in the Veritas videos. Let me finish. So that happened first, right? And then when the second round of because the Veritas videos generally come out on Monday, then the next one, or the second one, we had that that people were all up in arms about Joe Rogan endorsing Bernie Sanders because Joe Rogan is a sexist, racist, homophobe, whatever. Both stories are, to anybody with something that resembled that one time they had a brain cell, know that those things aren't true. But anytime you get, everything is about trending in search results. If you get on the internet and push in Bernie Sanders controversy, you're going to get the Elizabeth Warren thing one week and the Joe Rogan thing the next week over the Project Veritas thing. Those things were concocted to cover that. And the reason that even Fox is going along with it, right? So that is obviously I think they are for Bernie on a certain level, and I'll tell you why in a second. And I talked about this with Robert, but they covered it. And the reason you have, and people in the mainstream alternative media, like Jimmy Dore and Crystal Ball and these people, right? They're under this, like, they're now doing the same thing that they accuse the mainstream media of doing, which is censoring by way of just ignoring. They don't actually talk about things that are happening. So they're involved in doing that because they have this idea that they're righteous, and they've bought into this partisan thing that, like, if it's created by somebody on the right, it can't possibly be true. Although sometimes Jimmy Dore does commend Tucker Carlson. But listen to this. So the final.
But wait, I gotta say one thing, because it was the #1 trending hashtag on Twitter. It's not true. Like, it wasn't sunk by the Warren sexism.
It wasn't immediately, but eventually it was.
Eventually,
right? But it was because the Project Veritas thing goes up, then the mainstream media starts covering this Warren thing to cover for that, and by the end of the day or the next morning, it's on top of it because that's what the mainstream media is covering. And why isn't Fox covering it, right? Like, okay, but here, I'll tell you, they're all in bed.
Why isn't Fox?
I'm going to tell you why right now. Because the same thing they're now aware that the same thing that happened, because James O'Keefe really hurt Hillary last time, and the media has banded together, and even including Fox, because Fox is not as conservative as they used to be. They don't like the idea that somebody outside of the mainstream media can have an effect on deciding the president. Right? The media wants to pick the president. And even the conservative media, we talk about, like, why doesn't someone on the left do this to the right? Well, they don't want that happening either. They don't want someone creating a left-wing Project Veritas and infiltrating their stuff and having their dirty laundry shown. And so I guarantee you that the decision has been made that they will all band together, right? And they were not going to cover this at all because the media wants to be in the business. The mainstream media wants to have that role of we tell you what's important. We don't want somebody who isn't one of us coming in here and telling you what's important. That's why they deny the right, even though there's like, the Jimmy Dore and Dave Rubin and people like that, Joe Rogan for sure, get more views than any of the shows on CNN and MSNBC. They'll never admit that, right? Like, it doesn't make sense, the metrics. These people get paid millions of dollars to be wrong all day, and the people who are right, are there on the alternative media or who are more right. But I'm telling you, the mainstream media has all agreed that this issue is a no-go. Yeah.
If that's the case, then why is the alternative media not talking about it? Why is Joe Rogan not talking about it? Why is Jimmy Dore not talking about it?
Because they're part of it. Because they're they're enjoying this period of time now of like having been right about something else and whatnot. And they've endorsed Bernie Sanders. These people fully believe in the system. They're willing to accept the idea that we have a corrupt system, but they're not willing to look at the fact that like maybe the whole idea of the system is corrupt to begin with. Joe Rogan has found himself, and like this situation that we have politically has created Jimmy Dore and Joe Rogan, has put them in these spots. And right now they're riding that. They have a lot of power. They're not necessarily going to jump over. It's sad. It's sad because you look at some of these personalities and you think that they might, right? But, we all know that Joe Rogan has been over the last few years brainwashed into a more mainstream left way of thinking, that whereas he used to be more like a center left libertarian type.
Yeah.
Right. So he's been pushed over, and, who knows what else is going on here in the background. But, there is a hunger amongst young people. I was talking with Robert, and we're going to talk about this in a moment in relation to your friend, amongst idealistic young people for socialism. And for them, Bernie represents that. And so the system is not stupid. The system is going to take advantage of that and let some of those ideas that they would like to push, but in a different kind of way, rise with Bernie. He's an old man. He's never going to get to do all the things he wants, but he will bring in some acceptance, whether he wins or he's just the nominee, some acceptance of this idea of we in the West have too much and we should be willing to give up things, right? And we should be willing to, we were talking about it also in terms of like some of these new young athletes are giving all their money, their proceedings to the Australian fires and to social causes. And on one level that could be, oh, that's nice, that's wonderful that they're doing it. But this idea of redistribution of wealth, right? And this idea of like, let's all share and let's all get along, like is being glorified under Bernie. And they'll take advantage of the people that think this is a loving thing to then bring in Agenda 2030, which is technocratic rule and really much more Michael Bloomberg or Elizabeth Warren type of energy that will control it. But this idea of socialism can be very easily over a short period of time totalitarian tiptoed into Agenda 2030. It's an
so before we get into the Trojan horse that is socialism, that is absolutely going to bring in Agenda 21 and Agenda 3030, I just want to acknowledge, like, I thought it was gross enough. And then, I know there were whistleblowers who said that there were writers and editors at the New York Times who felt like it was their duty to protect the country from the dude in the Oval. And that is why they have been distorting the news the way that I have. Mm-hmm. I find it horrendously disheartening to realize that now Joe Rogan and mm-hmm. Jimmy Dore and all these other people who I had counted on in the past for an independent perspective, like it's weighing very heavily on me that media blackout is so big and tight and happening on so many levels. Because when I really sat with it and just like from my intelligent friends who I asked, like, hey, you guys know I wrote in Bernie. I'm not trying to tear Bernie down. I'm just wondering what we think about this. And the literal inability to let it into the mind, because yes, it would hurt the campaign. So now we're deferring to delusion
Yes.
and our own noble agendas over truth. And that is just, and I know that's like what you and I have in common. And that's where I'm just like, where is truth in all of this? And
so it's interesting for me to get to like sit here and have this conversation with you. Cause for me, what you're like, I don't feel quite so delusioned by it. Like to me at this point, and there's a part of me that feels bad for saying this. It's almost humorous. It's comical because for me, this was all going on during like the second election of Obama, right? What you're experiencing now was what I was experiencing then, and the way that I observed what was happening. Okay, and so like it is a really, really frustrating. And now, I mean, like that's why, you know, anything we look at, like I can, you know, look at it and go, okay, from this angle I like it, but from this angle I see it, because there is no we've talked about this many times before. That word government means mind control. So anything related to it will always be like working that, right? There is no such thing as truth in government. There can be no truth in mind control.
No, of course not. But
Yeah.
I'm talking about alternative media.
Yeah, it's part. I mean, but
I'm not talking about mainstream media.
Right, but the thing is that those people in that level of alternative media that we're talking about, they still believe in government.
And I'm also talking about my peers, like, and you and I have been talking about this for a long time. Like, yes, there is a feeling of isolation. Yes, I have very different ideas and opinions and beliefs than the vast majority of my friends, but it's like, it's just a new level of it.
Mm-hmm.
We're really not.
Well, it's because the social media and the technology has increased since even then. So that, as Randy would say, the noise to signal ratio is much louder.
Well, it's for sure, and it's also become trendier. It's like, because that's the other thing, as you and I talked about on the last show, people who don't track politics, who don't know anything about it, but have these very strongly held opinions because their Instagram followers and influencers are telling them to think these things. That's gotten so much stronger.
We didn't used to have a thing called the social media influencer or an Instagram influencer. So that right there is really, in some ways, what the problem is. But, you know, remember, I don't know if you remember this from when you were little, but like when I was little, like I figured out that Santa Claus wasn't real before a lot of the other kids did. And when I would say things like that, not only would they get upset with me, but their parents would get upset with me for informing them, their kid, of something that they still wanted their kid to believe in. This is the same thing. So people who believe in government and that this is like any sort of reflection of a fair and honest way to for humans to be dealt with and whatever, it's similar. Like when people ask me why I don't vote, I say I don't write letters to Santa Claus either. Right? Like the idea that there's this man who just loves you and watches everything you do and brings you presents to reward you for being good or bad is as silly as thinking that there's a benevolent government that acts in your personal, in not only in your own personal best interest, but in humanity's interest at all. There's no such thing. Santa Claus is a money-making venture, so is government. That's it, the end of the story. And so right now, you're playing that role of informing your friends, right? And the only reason you haven't heard from their parents is because we're at an age where most of their parents is dead, but you're informing them that Santa Claus doesn't exist, and therefore all of the other layers of the reality that they thought that they understood would come crashing down. So now they're defending their right to believe in Santa Claus the same way their parents defended it for them when they were little. I'm
just laughing because this has come up for me since Shaman Durek's book came out, and I told people that I ghost wrote it. It is like telling people that Santa Claus doesn't exist. They're like, wait, spiritual leaders don't write their own books? And then when I tell them that I'm friends with Joe Dispenza's ghostwriter, I mean, it's literally, I'm having the same experience of stealing people's notion of Santa Claus, because they're like, what? Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. And we know this, that people are under the deluded idea that government has their best interests in mind, just like people are under the deluded idea that the Green New Deal is a good thing, that AOC is an independent operator who really has the people's interests in mind.
You know, the AOC said something a few weeks ago that I believed in. I agreed with. I couldn't believe it. But you know, once you put it in context, I no longer, but the statement was great, right? Like she was at a Bernie rally or something, and she was talking about how People no longer want to consent to be governed by nonsense. Right? And that's right. There's a lot of
moments. Remember when she told the lefties to stop breeding if they were so concerned about the climate? Like she goes off.
She falls on some wonderful truths, and then she just ruins them with everything else she said. But yeah, like at this point, like here's the thing: if the left isn't as intelligent as they claim to be, right, as educated and all that kind of stuff, and is smart and whatever, they could bring down President Trump. What's today's date? February 4th. They could bring in exactly 2 months and 9 days, in 11 days, they could bring down President Trump. Everybody on the left who doesn't like Trump, don't pay your taxes. It's that simple. That's just, right. If they really were feeling that like we had to do by any means necessary, it was important to bring down this president. That's the way right there. And that was my hope was that when Trump got elected, right, that the left would recognize that, oh, as long as you have a system like government, we could end up being governed by a tool like this. Maybe we should take a look at whether or not government's a good idea. You know what, guys? Let's stop paying our taxes.
High hopes for our populace.
It wasn't even high hopes. It's just rational thought. There's a really easy way to take down the guy in the Oval, and that's it. And there's never been so many people who hated a particular president. And so all they had to do was do that. It's not hard.
But let's just play this out, okay? This would take people who were operating from genuine passion, devotion, and willpower. These people hate the president not for any real reasons. Mm-hmm. Not for any of the real reasons that apply to why you would hate this president. They hate the president for bullshit. That bullshit is not, there's not enough gravitas for that to fuel that type of civil disobedience, which is why it's just this like.
I don't think it's that. I think it's just that they're dumb. I think it's just that they're dumb. I just don't think they're as smart as they think they are, because these are all people who won't eat at Chick-fil-A because the Chick-fil-A doesn't support gay marriage. They stopped buying New Balance because New Balance donated to Trump. So if they can figure out that when somebody does something you don't like, you pull your money, then they can figure out pretty easily that if you don't like the president, you don't like the government, don't pay the taxes.
The IRS is not a government entity.
Right. But the truth be known, if people did not pay their taxes, as many people as don't like Trump didn't pay their taxes, they wouldn't be able to come get them all. And then the biggest controversy in the world would be how this quote, this thing about people not paying taxes and government not being funded.
But people don't not like the dude in the Oval because they care about how this country is governed. They don't like the dude in the Oval because it's fashionable to not like the dude in the Oval.
Right.
It's not based on anything real, so they're not going to take real action that would put their own.
There you go. So there we're back to the issue. Really is the fact that we have the social media right now, so people can do all this fake outrage all day. Most of these people who rail up and down, blah blah blah, about, you know how many people they found who are super anti-Trump that never even actually voted in the last election, right? Or who don't actually go out and protest at the marches and stuff.
When I ask people why they don't like them, the stuff that they cite, I'm like, have you seen that unedited? Have you seen the transcripts?
Right. No.
What we're dealing with is mass mind control and groupthink. This is a little bit separate, but just to show, this is where I'm disheartened because it's all a fucking popularity contest. A girlfriend of mine called me last week. She's head of a mom's group in LA, thousands of people. She's super Libby, actress, whatever. There was some sort of breakdown in her mom's group where she was accused of only some militant mom who's a woman of color was accusing her of only responding to white women and not caring about black women. And there was nothing steeped in truth, but my friend called me to tell me that she was steeped in this drama and it was making her really, really uncomfortable. So this morning I saw that she posted that caucuses are ableist, sexist, and should only be held and should not be held in states with an overwhelmingly white majority. And because I know the backstory,
that's a big thing right now, yeah.
Right, so I was like, okay, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen, but I understand the psychology. She's being ganged up on by all these other moms and being accused of being racist, so she's taking this she's overcompensating with this demonstration of her virtuosity.
Yeah.
This is where we're at. This is where we're at our maturity level. And I'm not saying this to insult her, but it's just if this is the adolescent game we're playing so that we could just show one another how virtuous we are so that we can be included, like, I don't want to say we're fucked, but I'm a little concerned.
Yeah, I think this is where you have to get like good and comfortable with being a loner, right? Or feeling really fortunate that you have like, you know, one or two other compadres kind of thing. I mean, I guess in some ways this goes, you know, I've always been, you know, while I'm fairly social and I have a lot of friends, that's not always been the case in my life. I've had periods of my life where I had no friends and I was totally a loner. But even at times when I've had big groups of friends, I've kind of always, I probably don't, you know anybody that is completely in line with my thoughts on things, right? And just having to become really comfortable with that. And, you know, sometimes people circle back 3, 5, 10 years down the line and like, you know what, you were right and I was wrong. And I was like, well, the point wasn't for me being right. I was just saying what didn't make sense to me. You know what I mean? Like, this doesn't, you know, this kind of behavior doesn't make sense, you know, and, but yes, people do overcompensate, and the virtue signaling is crazy. I mean, some of the memes that Sally shares with us.
They're amazing.
She's super good at picking these things out, and, you know, like, it's just kind of funny. But like, I mean, for me at this point, like, it's kind of, you know, and I don't mean this in any way, like, I mean, I have lots of things that I still struggle with. You know what I mean? I have lots of friends and people I know who are much more advanced than me in a lot of ways, and I rely on them for advice and wisdom. But as far as some of this like political stuff goes, like, it's almost like it's something that I walked past a number of years ago, and now I'm just like looking back and going, wow, that's still happening, and kind of, you know, it's humorous, it's comical to me at this point. I also understand that on a very human level, it's really sad. You know what I mean? And it's really sad. I don't know if I've lost any friends based on my, you know, I think sometimes my family might like to drop me, but I don't know if I've lost any friends based on my ideas about reality, because sometimes people just disappear from my life and I never hear from them again with no explanation. They just poof, be gone. And, you know, so, you know, maybe I rub people the wrong way, and at least your people have the balls to tell you why they're upset with you, even if it's nonsense. You know what I mean? But
I mean, I'm not
challenging.
Like, yes, I'm bummed about like my girlfriend who's calling me a Nazi, and like, that's what bums me out. But I'm more bummed for humanity and for all of us. I'm bummed for where it seems like we're heading, and I would like to be wrong. I don't know everything, but when I see what's laid out, you know, you and I have been tracking this for a really long time. I don't want to live in a police state. I don't want to live in a surveillance state. I don't want to be, you know, I don't want to see forced vaccinations happening. And so it bothers me to see people willingly, not choose their critical thinking, like not even inquire. Like, that was my frustration about the Veritas videos, was like, can you just watch them and then make up your own mind? Like, before you discount them as right-wing nonsense, why don't you take in the information and examine it yourself, and you decide with your own brain and your own perspective, your own experience, what you think about it. And I'm seeing less and less of that, and that has me really bummed.
Right, but these are the same people who like tell people, like, try to get people deplatformed, right? Like, if you have an opinion that is not acceptable, you shouldn't even be allowed to speak.
Oh, that was like the trans article that I wrote for Reality Sandwich. And like, the person who flipped out was like, boycott Reality Sandwich, shut them down, like, put them out of business.
Right, where a person who was truly intelligent, even if they literally thought that this person has horrible ideas, they would never want to shut them down from speaking, because if the people with horrible ideas aren't allowed to speak, we won't know who they are, and they could be lurking anywhere in our midst, right? And so, like, the solution to bad speech is I forget who says it, maybe it's Dave Rubin, is more speech, right? Better speech, right? And so I'm going to revert, as we were saying about being bummed and and not wanting to live in a police state, I'm going to revert once again to the same two sources, to Michael Malice, whose idea that the answer to the situation we live in is more chaos, right? Like, and to me, I'm kind of giggling over what happened in Iowa last night, right? Because it just makes the Democrats look stupid, right? I mean, literally, I almost called him Poot Buttigieg, Pete Buttigieg, right? Like, he literally paid for the app that caused all this confusion. Meanwhile, while nobody can sort it out, he's saying he won, right? So it's like, okay, if we can't see through that one, but whatever it is, there's all this chaos. The answer to control is more chaos, right? And in that, when people start to see that, like, none of these quote unquote control systems that people have given all their power away to actually have any control or know at all what's going on, then it will be exposed. And that's just a process that takes place over time. And that, this ability that we have with social media, even though it can seem oppressive at sometimes, it gives us the ability to expose some of the tactics, to make fun of, to lend to the lunacy. So that
thing. We're exposing all of this. We're offering such clear, and there's still this like la 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 la.
Right, but when something happens like what happened in Iowa last night, like,
are any of the Dems owning that happened?
I haven't seen enough stuff to say, but I'd say that some of these people who we've criticized for not being clear on their view of Bernie are being clear on their view of what has happened here. So little chinks coming in. And then I'm going to refer to the very same second source, which was this book I'm reading by Robert Anton Wilson called Cosmic Trigger, in which he details the only religion he ever found interesting, which is what he calls Discordianism, right? Which is basically almost like a making the idea of chaos a religion, right? Like, I'm only a little bit into this section on Discordianism, but it's a really easy way to tie up anybody who is super fervently a believer in a system, right? With a certain set of questions that just tear to shreds everything that they know. So I'm going to refer people to check out Michael Malice and Robert Anton Wilson. But I think all we can do is laugh at these times. I
think you're right.
So I think we can laugh, and we can, have a good time with our friends who can also laugh at the system. And, even though sometimes it's lonely, like, the people who are doing all that stuff, they're super angry. They're not really having a good time. You know what I mean? Like, when I was that intensely political, it was like, oh my God, like, when I needed something that was outside of me to change in order for me to feel satisfied and happy, like, it was really frustrating. And now it's like, it doesn't really matter to me that much. I'm affected at some by the people I know, you know what I mean? But mostly, like, it's the issues that bother me are the ones that go on with inside of me. You know what I mean?
I mean, I think that is the shift that I'm currently undergoing, is realizing that, like, okay, I'm not going to save us from the chaos. There's no preventing this, and it's time to just hold it really loosely and get really light about it and just focus on myself and being in integrity and walking my talk and letting the chaos be chaotic.
Yeah, at a certain point, like, some of these friends who are really super whipped up, their life's gonna get to a point where the chaos feels like too much for them, right? And then if they see that you are content within yourself, that may be the thing that brings them and go, wait a second, why is it if she's a Nazi, she's sitting there calm and content, and I'm whipped up into a frenzy out of the street screaming my head off? Like, let me re-examine things. And you actually have much more effect on other people when they come to you because they notice how calm or well-humored or whatever you are in a situation than when you're screaming back and forth and one is screaming louder than the other. So totally. All right. You want to talk a little bit about the Socialism 2030 thing, or you want to table that for next time?
Let's table it for next time.
I think this was a good talk. Yeah.
Because it's a big thing, and it'll give us more time to just, like, really go there.
Okay. So let's do that. All right. So, guys, you can find Dani at DaniKatz.com. You can find me at Off Planet Radio, or on Facebook at Emily Moyer. She's doing transformational life coaching sessions. I'm doing nutritional consultations and some kind of life coaching and helping people sort through some of their mind control issues if they have them. You can hit me up if you'd like help with any of that. We will have news coming shortly about the prospects of a live chat group and some further controversial content that may be off of YouTube. So stay tuned, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Thanks, Emily. Bye, everyone.
Bye.